What's something your employer did that instantly eliminated employee morale? Story 1. My boss is looking to retire in the next 3 to 4 years. He told everyone that he wanted us to come up our visions for the company and its future over the next 5, 10, 20 years. We're a small office of about a half dozen people, but we've been growing, and so everyone brought up growth projections and succession planning once he retires, etc. His son is the heir apparent and has a precocious 8-year-old. So in my 20-year version, I even included the grandson joining the business and grooming it to become a legacy company. My boss went last, and we were expecting something acknowledging some of our thoughts, or at least an expression of appreciation that the company he founded would live on well past his retirement, be in good hands, etc. Instead, it was brutal and short. It was something along the lines of, I do everything around here anyway, so I should just sell the company to fund my retirement, and you can all find other companies to work for in a few years. Mood eliminate, meeting ended. Story 2. Work at a famous seafood restaurant. One of the cooks came back after 6 months after having a baby and now has Saturdays and Sundays off because she needs to take care of her kid. Understandable. Everyone else has kids and collectively asks for one weekend day off. Management says no because we're stretched pretty thin at the moment. Now everybody works 6 days this week because the same girl went on vacation. Story 3. Offered company-branded cash as an incentive to work harder and clear claims more quickly. People busted their jerk, worked unpaid overtime, etc. We were all salary to earn this cash because it could be used for things like TVS, vacation, and a million other things. I accumulated close to 1,400 of this fake money busting my jerk to get enough for the cash bonus. They never let us redeem them. After our busy season was over, they just let it drop. Everyone kept asking about it, and they would blow it off with emails about updating you soon. Never happened. A bunch of people had donated their extra company cash to one worker who was using it to get items for a charity auction. We continued to bother the company. They never let us redeem them for anything. It was total bullshit. I quit shortly after. I just walked out one day. When I got home, I blasted a long, blistering company-wide email criticizing them for the lack of respect for their workers. According to those I know that still work there, very few due to the wave of turnover I apparently triggered, I am a legend. No one ever got anything for their code blue bucks. Story 4. Busting my jerk off at a company where I was effectively on call 24 hours a day for 3 years, leading development of core products. My boss constantly told me I was wrong about things, only to come back 2 months later to tell people to do what I told them to 2 months before, but now claiming it was his idea, blaming me for every mistake in the product, including those that were his ideas, and refusing to let me get around to doing those things I was actually hired to do because there was a chronic backlog of things to do because he refused to hire enough hands to get them done. Those were bad enough, but the time he flat out told me that he didn't give a shoot about my career progression or anyone else's on my teams, when he canceled our participation in conferences so that we could slave away on a project we'd already come close to completing, yeah, that was bad. We lost 3 people on a team of 4. On the core product, about half the staff has turned over, and yet the company insists that nothing is wrong and that the guy is a great leader. Yep, going to be a reference for another guy who's leaving tomorrow. Story 5. Told us we were all replaceable. A staff of 20 poorly paid but very caring healthcare assistants in a private nursing home. Private sector means shoot wage in UK, as not government mandated, unlike NHS or county council. He was a drunken moron, and I only stayed because his wife was the best nursing home owner I had ever worked for. Just had a blind spot with her tipsy sod of a husband. Anyway, some of the older women, ones with husbands who had salaries rather than wages, stood up and left. Someone rang his wife and she came in. We didn't see him for 2 weeks, and when we did see him, she had busted him down to care assistant. I was his line manager, and made him apologize to all of us. That's why the older ladies came back and nobody actually left. He eliminated morale, but his wife, the brains, gave it the kiss of life. Story 6. I worked at a pizza place a few years ago. The pay was incredible for the job, 6 an hour flat rate, tips, and 52 cents a mile. I was making like $600 a week after taxes just to deliver pizza. Everyone loved the job. The owner decided to decrease to pay to 7.25 while in the store, 2.13 on the road, and $1 per run. This resulted in about a 200 decrease every check. Half the drivers left. Story 7. Company I work for has had several. They eliminate meetings where everyone could get on the same page simply because the boss couldn't handle public constructive criticism. They changed the methods by which pay tip sharing worked for supervisors without notice and attempted short-sighted pay structure changes to the employees. When the employees figured this out, it was at first denied. Then we were told it was none of our concern, even though it affected all of our pay. Story 8. City Charter School. Lots of community members in aid positions, and they kept the school together. About 20 teachers and staff were purged on a Black Friday about a month out from the school year. They were not given letters to return the next year, and the place went ballistic, replacing almost half the staff when really, my principal didn't bother leaving his office and assessing the situations in the classrooms. Instead, he just fired teachers. I left after I was given an offer, and he claimed I should be more loyal to those who gave you an opportunity. Bro, my 4 years of college and teaching license gave me the opportunity. Get out of here. Story 9. Regarding how employees will travel between Site A and Site B, what if something happens to their kids? They will need a way back here, and sharing one vehicle between 8 people makes that difficult. They won't want to come back. They'll stay and work. No. Parents will 100 not care at all about what's happening at work when somebody calls and said there's something wrong with their kid. We don't need to invest in group transport. Then we bought a company van that employees don't like. Story 10. Not me, but someone on my direct family works for Build-A-Bear as a chief workshop manager. The Pay Your Age event was horrendous for their team morale and made several of them want to quit. Beyond just the main PYA event, the next day the company sent out coupons for 15 off to everyone, not just the people who showed up and didn't get a bear, as a half-assed way of saying, sorry we couldn't meet demand. It was a bullshit marketing ploy, and they knew full well what it would cause. So while being out of stock and utterly exhausted, the entire following week they had massive amounts of traffic and angry customers demanding to use the same printed coupons 4 times in a transaction. It's supposed to be one per customer, but there's nothing preventing someone from printing multiple copies and using it over and over in different transactions. Then their customer care team over the phone tells customers one thing, while corporate tells the employees at the stores to do something else, and the store employees end up dealing with angry customers who were lied to. I've lost all respect for Build-A-Bear. Story 11. Had a boss that got upset when nobody answered his question quick enough on a conference call. So he told all of us techs to bring in our uniforms and tools the next day, and he would decide who stays and who leaves. He only fired one person that day, but the rest of us found other jobs and quit within the next couple weeks. So he ended up having hundreds of clients and only 4 techs, his family, to do all the work. Story 12. I told the hiring manager that I was disappointed in one of his hires because he knew literally nothing about our job and asked him, doesn't that cheapen my knowledge and expertise? His response, well, let's be honest, your job doesn't really need all that, does it? There were 4 other people my level with varying fields of expertise at that meeting, and it got real quiet after that. Story 13. Me personally, I'm a security guard at a library. My boss said she wanted me moving around a lot, which is cool. I would get up every 15 minutes, patrol the entire building, then sit back down for another 15 minutes. It's not the busiest place, so it seems to work out fine, especially since my coworkers always know how to get a hold of me. However, apparently a coworker told my supervisor I was slacking off, and this coworker's known for micromanaging people she has no control over and wasn't doing my job properly. But instead of talking to me about it, my boss just says, oh, I meant constantly walking, 4 to 8 hours straight, no sitting down at all. Also, we fired the only other security guard, so you got to take his shifts too. So other than a legally obliged 15-minute break, I'm supposed to be hiking all day long and assert my presence to the dozen or so patrons we have. I'm turning in my 2-week notice on Wednesday, and in the meantime, I just take very long bathroom breaks. Story 14. Made us start staying open until 4 on Fridays instead of closing at noon, and didn't increase our pay to accommodate for it. Story 15. No raises or bonuses this year due to company performance. but I will make it up to you by taking the whole company to the lake for a trip on my new 30-foot boat. Answer. Business had been running for 3 years, and many of the employees had been there from the beginning without getting a pay rise. After some requests, the company announced that there would be a review of everyone's pay, called in each worker to discuss. Basically, they had decided to pay every employee the same amount. This meant that a few got a raise, most stayed the same, and some who had negotiated better at hiring had their wages reduced. Needless to say, most employees were unhappy. 2 weeks later, the three brothers who owned the business bought themselves 2 new cars and a second-hand Rolls-Royce. That was a real slap in the face. Story 16. Worked at a very dodgy debt management company a few years ago, as I was stuck for work, and it's all I could get at the time. Management were awful. Most days, at least one employee would leave sobbing, and they seemed to really get a kick out of it. After a meeting where one girl stood her ground and told them she felt she was being bullied, they decided to bring this up in a team meeting. One manager's exact words were, "We've been told by a team member that we come across as bullies. So please, if you feel like we're bullying you or anyone else, put your hand up now." Yup, we were in complete silence for at least a minute. I eventually got sacked as I was asking too many questions and discovered where their money was actually going. Story 17. The head honcho established a new, "if you have cell phones out, you get fired" policy at a minimum wage campus bookstore. I, along with 15 employees and 5 managers, have quit in the past 2 months. Answer. Oh man, I've worked retail jobs and restaurant jobs that didn't care if you used your phone to pass the time as long as the guests' customers were properly accommodated. I work in a funeral home now where the work seems to be either constant or non-existent, depending on the day. I can't imagine not being allowed to entertain myself in some fashion during those long hours in the office just waiting for the phone to ring. As long as the work is being done, it makes sense to me to allow employees to surf their phones in their downtime. Endless boredom will burn you out fast. Story 18. They gave us all a nice raise because so many people were leaving to go work at a competitor that paid more. Then management changed around, and when it came time for our scheduled, smaller annual COLA raise, they said that our previous raise was just to get us through till the COLA, and they were taking away our previous raise and making us pay part of it back. But at least we could pay it back over several paychecks. So many people gave their 2 weeks notice that day, and the next that they changed their mind within a week. Story 19. I once had a retail manager who sent out a memo that we worked so hard and did such a great job this month that she gets a bonus. That went over like a lead balloon. Answer. Comment repost. I went through this same kind of bullshit. I, along with 9 other coworkers, did a Kaizen project where we cut customer complaints from over 100 month to single digits due to streamlining our process. The plant manager sent out a company-wide email essentially taking credit for the whole thing. He noted how he put together this team, and under his direct supervision, he got the project done without even mentioning our names. That pissed all of us off until the continuous improvement manager sent a reply thanking all of us in a big fudge you to the plant manager. I was just happy that the CI manager was a no-bullshit guy. I left that job a few months after we completed it and still use it on my resume. Story 20. Was working for EB Games when GameStop bought them. 20 of any warranty and 1 for every subscription sold went into your paycheck as commission. And you'd never feel dirty selling the things because Edge Magazine, EB's answer to Game Informer, and their extended warranties were legit and fairly priced. GameStop buys the company. First thing they do? Nix the commissions. You still have to sell the stuff, of course. I'll never forget the first meeting I had with GameStop as a manager. They really drilled how profitable those things are to the company. Soon after came the threats of reduced hours if you didn't hit quotas, mandated by corporate. Yeah, fudge GameStop. Edit. And my top post of all time is me saying fudge GameStop. I am amused. Answer. Is that generally true for GameStop? If the employees don't get commission, I probably won't buy anything there again. I just assumed that they did, considering how hard they pushed to get you to buy or pre-order random things. Edit. After hearing all the stories about how they threaten their employees for not pushing junk, I think I definitely won't be supporting GameStop anymore. Story 21. Work at daycare. A parent got in a disagreement with one of our employees over something pretty dumb. Parent was in the wrong, but my coworker could have handled it better. Parent wanted the employee fired, which was definitely overdoing it. Supervisor refused. So the mother was now pissed at both my coworker and my supervisor. The mom ended up getting several other parents together and complaining to the owner. Both my coworker and supervisor were fired. Morale in that place dropped. Not only was every other employee pissed, but we were now short-handed. It went from being a place where I was legitimately involved and concerned about the babies and their future to just another job, and it showed. Kids could tell, parents could tell, owner could tell. We went from being the #1 rated childcare center to just another daycare. This is a classic example of management catering to a "the customer is always right" mentality, even when it's clearly detrimental to the staff. Firing experienced employees over a single unreasonable complaint is a quick way to turn a successful business into a place where no one wants to work with any heart. Story 22. Former teacher. The administrators at my school were usually pretty chill, but had a habit of randomly coming up with minor rules that they would enforce for us. Male teachers had to wear ties even on jeans day, etc. Overall, it wasn't bad, except for the time an administrator made a crucial mistake. They banned staff from drinking coffee in front of students. Now, if you've never worked in a school, you think this isn't a big deal. When you spend nearly 100 of your day in front of students, it definitely is a big deal. First, we tried to find any loophole we could. Energy drinks? Banned the next week. Tea? Banned 2 days later. It was chaos. Eventually, we realized they couldn't fire an entire school's worth of teachers and aides, so we ended up doing the one thing that private schools fear most. We formed a union. Realistically, it was more of a weird pseudo-union focused specifically on civil disobedience regarding the coffee issue, but it ruffled feathers nonetheless. The administrators caved to our demands, allowed us to drink coffee again, and even bought each of us a reusable coffee mug as a gesture of goodwill. And that's the story of how a handful of school administrators almost accidentally created a teachers' union over a complete non-issue. Story 23. Had a big fight with his wife in front of everybody. I don't think you should run a restaurant with your family members unless you're really solid with each other. Story 24. A satellite TV provider canceled the bonuses for a 2-month competition in the last couple weeks for a group of their customer service reps. We were busting our butts helping out new customers that had problems and really turned around customer satisfaction scores. We never saw a bonus from that incentive. The company pulled the same crap later on in the year, completely reneging on a bonus. This company disavowed incentives multiple times, and managers knowingly miscalculated bonuses even though it was printed on literature given to employees. I was only there a year and a half. Terrible morale. Promising bonuses and then taking them away is one of the fastest ways to lose employee trust for good. When a company repeatedly breaks its financial promises, productivity inevitably drops because people stop seeing the point in going above and beyond for empty words. Story 25. In a company of 6 people, owner said in a meeting with everyone that his 2 sales guys are irreplaceable and that the rest of us are just paper pushers. Story 26. My coworker lost his dog and came into work teary-eyed. Our manager looked at him, asked him what's wrong, and then proceeded to go on a 30-minute rant about him needing to toughen up and it's just a stupid animal. Go buy another dumb dog. Needless to say, she no longer works for the company. Story 27. Had a worker that worked herself silly for the job. Really loved the venue, loved the clients, loved the work, so she would work after clocking off, take work home, go in on weekends. Really just go above and beyond. We always got incredible feedback from clients and suppliers about her. In our contract, it says we're entitled to a $5,000 raise after being employed for 3 years. At our yearly renewal, having been there for 3.5 years, she asked for the raise. She was flat out told there was no room in the budget. She could have taken them to Fair Work Commission, but instead she just started looking for jobs. She left, got a great position in a great company, and is loving it. The guy they hired to replace her had a quarter of the experience. No love for the bum, and his annual salary was $10,000 higher. Most of us have since left, and the place is falling to shoot. Story 28 held a super positive pep rally-style company-wide meeting about how they were going to start combining our sick days with our vacation days, and now just call them PTO. This was presented to us as a great thing. since we could all now use our PTO days fully as vacation days if we wanted to. Once the system was implemented, everyone realized that instead of getting 10 vacation days and 10 sick days per year, we now all had 15 PTO days. Everyone was pissed. Edit. I just want to say that anyone bragging in the replies about how this wouldn't affect them because they don't use their sick days has fudge up priorities. Answer. Genuine question. Is this the standard in America? In the UK, we have a legal minimum of 28 days of paid holiday. Plus, if you're sick, you're sick. You don't go to work. You can't get fired for that. What do you guys do if you want to book a holiday 2 weeks away somewhere, but you've already been sick for a day or two? Or what happens if you get sick after you've used your sick days? Story 29. So my SO just had this happen. Working in a call center, she was employee of the month, had some of their highest metrics, etc. She noticed she started getting back-to-back calls while everyone else was getting 15 minutes of availability, contacted her boss's boss, and was continually being reassured that the issue was getting looked into. Her being stressed and overworked went on for 3 months. Eventually, she messaged the regional manager, and it was fixed the very next day. My acting theory is that one of her managers placed her into a priority queue to make their own stats look better. But everything worked out, right? Nope. She got an email today stating that she wouldn't be getting her bonus because she was using ACW too much. It's a temporary state you can place yourself in, which postpones you being placed into the call queue in order to finish up your work from the previous call. She literally had no choice because she got seconds between calls. Funny thing, she saved documentation of everything. Threw her managers under the bus, quit, and got another job all in the same day. Story 30. Firing half the staff for no reason other than to clean house when new management caused the other half to leave as well. You wouldn't think it possible for a hotel to go out of business in less than 2 months, but lo and behold, it did just that. Edit. Holy shoot, my highest rated comment by far and all in less than 4 hours? Darn, I wish karma was tangible. Ha ha ha. Edit 2. People are asking for more details. So I'm pasting this comment to a user I replied to further down. New general manager came in, fired all the best people. I was really good, but had only been there for 3 years, so I wasn't making a lot because they were making too much money, and replaced them with base pay workers who didn't give a shoot. Then that increased the workload on everyone else that wasn't fired, so they all quit. Then the hotel was stuck with half a shoot staff. Funny thing is that we made in the ballpark of $20 million the year before my original GM left, and the year the new GM took over. I heard from one of the few people that still worked there were 2 originals out of a 60-person staff, that they were projected to barely clear $2 million. We were in the top 5 Hiltons in the entire Midwest for years, and there were only a handful of nights like Christmas when we wouldn't sell all 140 rooms. Why that dumb shoot tried to change everything when the place ran itself and was kicking serious jerk, I will never know, but he's out of a job now. My old GM would literally leave halfway through the day if he wanted, rarely, because our managers were so good and everyone actually cared about the place. Answer. Oh man, I want to hear more about this. Edit. First of all, guys, I went to sneak in the exit of Costco just now to buy pizza without a membership card, and by the time I got back, I had like 30 messages and 1,200 upvotes. And I gotta say, I'm both confused and impressed. Edit 2. I know you don't need a membership card for the food court, but I still get paranoid that I'm gonna get stopped every time. I've done it dozens of times. Trying to save money by cutting experienced staff often ends in disaster, as seen in this hotel's case. Replacing professionals with low-paid workers caused a functional system to collapse and revenue to drop significantly, proving once again that being cheap can be very expensive in the long run. Story 31. We have 4 employees. One went on vacation, another called out sick on my day off. We aren't allowed to work alone, so I had to cover, which forced me into overtime. Thank you for coming in on your day off. Mind if I move your hours around so I don't have to pay you overtime? Story 32. It was a 1-2 punch. The company-wide meeting announced the promotion of several high-level management and executives, mostly title and responsibility changes. Lots of smiles and handshakes, not unlike a college graduation ceremony. After these promotion announcements, They declared that due to the stagnant economy and poor sales, the entire company would be experiencing a pay freeze as a result. So, no raises for anyone. They then concluded the meeting by discontinuing casual Fridays. So no more jeans on Friday. It almost felt like it was designed to make people want to quit and leave. It worked though. I and many others moved on to greener pastures within the year. Edit. To answer some of the questions posed, but without sharing too much personal information, this was a mid-sized manufacturing firm in the US around 2010. I moved on to what was the most lucrative job I have ever had as a result of this. So I don't hold any resentment. I just remember it utterly destroyed employee morale that day. If it was the ownership management's plan to get people to quit, it was pretty stupid, as only the mobile and capable talent moved on, while those incapable of finding another door, or the lifers, who would probably stay on even if the company announced they planned to cut the oxygen supply to the building by 50 to save money, stayed on through it. I can understand the need for promotion to fill positions from vacancies, etc. I can understand the need to have a pay freeze beats layoffs, right? But doing the prior two right after each other and then saying, yeah, and no more casual Fridays just seemed really vindictive and malicious. If anything, they should have softened the blow of the pay freeze by saying casual Friday is now every day, and people would have left the meeting at least neutral, if not slightly hopeful. Story 33 would say things like, I don't care, get it done, or just do it like how the client asked, when telling him why certain things wouldn't work out. Then the client would come back pissed because it didn't work out. Once got one of my bosses, ex-BFF, to admit, I knew it wasn't going to work, but I didn't want to admit I was wrong. Sorry. Geek Squad is a great environment. Then again, YMMV, as the job was great before we got new leaders who didn't know how to act or run the department. Story 34. Company owner left on a 2-week vacation to Chile without telling anyone. It was a small marketing firm with about 7 employees. I texted him on Monday morning around 11:30 a.m., asking where he was. He stayed out late drinking pretty frequently and often didn't roll in until 11 a.m. He informed me he was on vacation and put me in charge for the next 2 weeks, probably because I was lucky enough to be the first person to text him. He missed 2 client meetings and 1 campaign pitch, all of which went okay, and we managed without him. I even signed on a new account and had all the paperwork completed and was working on brand new campaign ideas to show him when he returned. He only called twice to check in, showed up 2 weeks later and declared that the company was bankrupt and we were all out of jobs. So yeah, that was an instant morale killer. Story 35. Told a bunch of people they were going to be promoted to get us to do extra work. No one got promoted. I basically did her job for a month. Me and 3 of my coworkers quit, and she got fired a few months later. Story 36. Plumbing shop. Newer owners came in. They were a married couple who had worked there for years and bought out the original owner. A few months later, as we are heading into Christmas, they called each employee in one at a time to explain how they, the employee, weren't getting a holiday bonus because the employee had messed something up earlier in the year. My reason was that I had broke a mirror in a customer's bathroom and it had cost $200 to replace, and they just couldn't afford to pay any bonuses. I brought in over $500,000 worth of business that year. Next week, they drove up in a new sports car. Someone asked what it was, and another plumber said it was a 2007 Christmas bonus. They've had a huge turnover in employees now. No one from when I worked there, 94 to 08, is still there. Story 37. Fired the 3 most likable, productive people in the department to bring in their own people under the guise of downsizing and restructuring. The entire department quit within a month. Story 38. I have 2. Company 1 canceled the Christmas party and Christmas bonuses for the whole company because we didn't have the money for it. I found out later the CEO and the CTO used company funds to take a week-long ski vacation in Whistler instead of doing something nice for the employees. You better believe I spread that evidence around in the office. Company 2, it's not one specific incident, but my current company in the last couple years switched from guaranteed permanent employment for anyone who worked there long enough to a system of permanent contract labor for a huge section of their workforce. Rumblings of unionization have started amongst the contract workers. Answer, I can do you worse. Company consisted of something like 1,200 employees at the time and rented out a big conference center for a Christmas party. At the opening of the party, the CFO was giving opening remarks and asked, expecting cheers, if everyone liked their Christmas bonuses. He got booed. See, of that 1,200 people, a bit over 1,000 were in customer service. No one in customer service got bonuses. Only people in the corporate departments got bonuses. And our awesome CFO decided to rub everyone's noses in it because clearly the chief financial officer of a company would have no idea that 80 of his company didn't get bonuses. At the same party, the CEO made an announcement that the company would be closed on Friday. Christmas that year was on a Thursday, and everyone got a day off. Now he had literally just finished making a speech about how everyone was important and everyone was part of the company, no matter the department. He had shoveled shoot hard trying to make CS happier. The next day, we all got a memo that customer service still had to work on that Friday. We apparently didn't count as everyone, and the CEO just hadn't realized that the announcement wouldn't apply to anyone. January saw a 60 attrition rate. Story 39. Teacher here, scheduled tutorials for Saturday on Mother's Day weekend, then told us we had to submit proof we had called at least 20 parents to invite students to attend by the next day. They told us this in a meeting that took up our planning time, so we would all have to stay after school to do this. The English department looked like someone just announced our own funerals. Story 40. Made the requirements for a raise so much stricter, which stated that if you wanted a raise, it included rotating shifts, which if anybody has or is doing that knows how much it blows. Campaign for a shorter lunch break. Disguised it as a way to leave earlier every day. We countered with having them take away our break altogether, which would allow us to have an entire day off instead. Didn't happen. They switched the pay scale. More or less everybody with the same title got paid that same, regardless of production or experience or time at the company. Meant that, for example, me, with 7 years experience, working at 100 productivity, was getting paid that same as another guy with 6 months experience, working at 60, meant everybody just started working to just above the lowest productivity. English isn't my first language, so excuse any errors. On somewhat related news, I put in my 2 weeks today. Story 41. At a company-wide meeting, 45 people, called the employees an expense, did not go over well at all. 2 people actually stood up and threatened to quit on the spot. The boss didn't reevaluate his statement and could explain what was wrong with it. Edit. This might be a translation error on my part. The meeting was in Swedish, and he made it pretty clear by tone of voice and overall feel that he only thought of the employees as an expense and not a resource. That yes, costs money, but also is the reason the company actually earns money as well. And if he could, he would do it all by himself to save on the expenses of having employees. We are talking about engineers with years, some cases decades of experience, and he thought he could replace them if only he had the time. That's what the meeting was about. Story 42. For years, I worked in a high-stress, high-turnover, low-paying job doing caregiving for adults with developmental disabilities. These issues are typical in this field, and my company, like many, exploited salaried employees by expecting them to work 50 to 60 hours regularly and often more. I went months at a time working 70, 80, 90-hour weeks. I stayed through a lot of bullshit because I loved the folks I served. Last year, corporate required all managers to attend a mandatory training about caregiver fatigue. It made it worse for me to have language to describe the fatigue and burnout I'd been experiencing for years. Within the meeting, corporate acknowledged that they didn't pay us enough and that many employees we supervised were literally homeless, food insecure, or on the verge of it. But increased pay is not on the table right now, so let's talk about other things we can do. They crowdsourced this exhausted group of salaried workers who suggested things like starting a company food pantry, a company clothing drive, and compiling lists of shelters in the area. That meeting was so blood-boilingly infuriating to sit through that I made the decision that day it was time to finally get out. I worked my last day for that employer this summer. I'm still looking for a full-time job, and I'm trying to hold out for a company that values my work enough to pay me fairly. In an ideal world, this new company doesn't add insult to injury by mandating training about how to recognize telltale signs of being ready to snap. Hopefully, when I've had some time to recover, it'll be able to come up with some lasting ways to change things in the caregiving industry. These systemic problems will only compound themselves as the baby boomers continue to age. Story 43. CEO announced during a company-wide meeting that everyone would be getting raises and laid out exactly what money people would be on based on their job roles, even showing the structure on a PowerPoint, then didn't actually go through with any of it. Story 44. Fired the girl who was in her third trimester of pregnancy 3 days before her maternity leave was to start. Answer: my wife was let go after she announced her pregnancy to her manager, and approximately when she would need maternity leave. She was told that they'd rather replace her than deal with a pregnant employee and all that goes with that. A well-worded letter from our attorney got her 1 year severance and 2 years medical coverage for her and the baby. Story 45. In a very short span of time, they changed everyone's 401k plan for worse and then implemented an office-wide cleanliness policy. No eating at your desk. Only 3 personal items on your desk, everything labeled. No items other than your keyboard, mouse, and monitors on your desk at the end of the day. Talk about pissed off. You could feel the gloom when you walked in. Everyone's give a shitter broke at once. Story 46. Production manager got tired of sales staff being overpaid and went into the bookkeeper's spreadsheets that were in an open file on the server, printed out everyone's salary, and left copies on the break room table. 3 people quit that day. Story 47. To cut costs, they started a policy that only certain departments had internet access. It basically started a class system that bred resentment across departments and caused an exodus from the non-internet teams. Answer: I worked for a concierge company owned and run by a crazy lady. We had contracts with buildings and she'd routinely lose the contracts by taking meetings with them and then acting crazy. She was actually banned from one of the buildings that we still had a contract with. Anyways, I worked at a building with about 4 other people. We were basically security guards checking in guests all day, and we didn't make much money. After hiring this shoot employee who basically wouldn't do his job and instead surfed the internet right in front of the guests, rather than firing said shoot employee, they took away our internet access. This made employee performance worse, as now everyone had to stare down at their cell phones instead of straight ahead at the computer. Even I would occasionally get caught staring at my phone instead of the guest in front of me. Some people are quiet as hell. So then they banned our phones, which banning someone's phone basically just means that whenever a supervisor is present, which was about 5 minutes per day, nobody was on their phones, and the rest of the time, it was phone city all day, every day. This was like a month-long battle, and most of the 5-person team we started with ended up quitting. Guess who the one dude that didn't quit was? Original shoot employee who I know continued to ignore guests and stare at his phone because I stayed friends with some people in the building and would stop by from time to time. Always catching original shoot employee staring down at his phone. Story 48. I worked at a restaurant with a shoot tipped minimum, $2.63 an hour. We'd be penalized for being even 5 minutes late, so lots of us showed up 20 to 30 minutes early to make sure we'd avoid the penalty. This is Boston, so that was an appropriate gamble. I've gotten stuck on the T for 10 to 20 minutes on numerous occasions, and we just get right to work. And there's plenty to do when opening a big restaurant, so we'd clock in and start working. No one was clocking in and failing to work. In fact, I liked getting there early because the kitchen would get up to 113. Most of the morning prep occurred in the kitchen and was fairly rigorous. We didn't really air condition and had to wear long-sleeve shirts and pants. So I could knock everything out in a tank and shorts, change into my uniform, and not start my shift a sweaty mess. The manager gave us a big lecture about how it adds up, even if it is only $2.63 an hour. She made a new rule that we couldn't clock in more than 10 minutes before our shift began, even if we were working. By the way, that's a 15-minute window of appropriate clocking in time. In Boston, with a notoriously unreliably public transportation system, crazy weather, and overclogged roads. Fudge Grafton Street and Fudge U, Ashley. Story 49. Casually said, the best employee was X, and everyone, including X, knew that X was among those who did the least amount of work. Edit: X was the most friendly to the boss, always coming in to say, "Hi, do you need anything?" Story 50. For me, it was working 20 to 23 hours on Friday to help the shipping manager who had been abandoned by everyone else. We would load sometimes 2 or 3 extra trucks to help our company, walking across the factory to find doors. It takes about 8 hours for one person to load a truck, assuming everything is there. And God forbid you get an overload. The general manager would come out and tell us that everything was going to change and we were doing a great job, etc. Anyway, review time comes. I get a bonus of 500, which I would be happy to get, and a warning to adjust my attitude. I moved to another facility and he had ruined customer relationships and productivity to such an extreme the factory was closed in less than 6 months. I would have been much happier not receiving one and him having a plan to improve things, but he was in way over his head. Story 51. Limited interoffice communication and banned casual or outside communication. No phone calls or emails except during 1 hour a day. If the accounts payable or HR people have a question, they can wait until your core phone time to get an answer. No talking to your coworkers unless it is a work-related question, and then preferably only during the core hour for communication. No personal calls except for emergencies. No telling your wife you are going to be late unless you are on break. No cell phones at all. If they see a cell phone, you will be disciplined 3 times and you are fired. This is what eliminate me, as the only way I got through that job was by listening to audiobooks. First week of the ban, one of the guy's kid ends up in the ER. Daycare can't get a hold of him. He doesn't find out until hours later when he calls them back at lunch. Boss says, well, it was an emergency, you could have answered that call. But how are you supposed to know it's an emergency? You aren't allowed to have ringtones on. If it vibrates, you aren't allowed to take it out of your pocket purse. Take the call. It turns out not to be an emergency, and bam, that's one of your 3 warnings. I quit. I got to the point where I would just cry my way to work. Out of 10 of us, there were 3 at the end of 2 weeks. Story 52. It seems like a small thing. The company I worked for, I was one of 3 salespeople. The operations manager, who was my line manager too, insisted that when I was in the office with just him and 4 others who were dressed casual, had to wear a tie. Said it to me in front of the others. He didn't wear a tie. We were in an industry where relationships with customers made business suits and ties were not normal. So fudge him, I wore in the most horrific ties I could find, Christmas ones in summer, ones colorblind people wouldn't be seen dead in, shiny ones with fish on. He challenged me on it, and I asked him to put it in writing, explaining the reason for it and to show me where it was on my contract. He backed down. I left shortly afterwards to a rival company and made it my business to wreck them. Story 53. Changed up the metrics that determine people's bonuses and included things that were important for the business to know, but completely beyond the control of the people whose bonuses were impacted. For example, we had a right party contact rate, how many times you actually got the person you were calling versus the number of calls you actually made. The problem was the phone number list came from elsewhere, and the people making the calls were just given a list of numbers, and you had to call them all. No leeway. So you're calling blind from a list you don't control and get penalized if the list is shoot. Oddly enough, the people in charge of making the phone number lists, their bonuses were not influenced by right party contact rate. Story 54. Boss pitched a sales incentive trip to Cancun if the team hit the goal. My team exceeded the goal, and then they canceled the trip. 2 people quit. I accepted a position with their main competitor, and less than a year later, they closed in bankruptcy. Karma's a beach. Story 55. Vancher made it so that only restockers could go to the storage area and bring out items that needed to be restocked. This pretty much created chaos because there was usually only 1 restocker per shift, and when things got really busy, everything slowed down and made things worse for everyone. 2. Not allowing cashiers to leave the registers, even if it wasn't busy. 3. Cutting hours from employees that had been there for years. 4. When some of the staff learned that they were glorified temporary workers and that they'd eventually be forced to leave, they tried to make us feel better by telling us to reapply after 6 months and maybe we'd be hired back. Story 56. My favorite is summer hours. I now work 10-hour days and then inevitably have a Friday emergency, so I work Friday too. Story 57. Small business. 20 employees. Boss made a big speech about austerity measures and no raises this year. A week and a half later, he drives up in a brand new Silverado with all the bells and whistles. Expense to the business, of course. He would dislike to have to pay taxes on those profits. One of the less subtle members of the staff took a literal shoot in front of his office door. Answer, mine did the exact same thing, but with a Katy Escalade. He officially had two now, and a BMW for his wife, all expensed to the company in Virginia, where there are property taxes on your vehicles, unless they were used for business purposes. After cutting off sick days and constant cost cutting, like canceling business phone plans, switching janitorial services, leasing the cubicle office to another company, forcing people to work from home, and report to meetings every day regardless. For a Katie. Story 58. Promotion went to the newest person because they were the least valuable to our manager in the IT service desk. They got promoted to deployment for 10,000 more over people with 4 to 6 years working there. Story 59. I work part-time at a university library while I attend school. I sit at the checkout desk information desk. My boss, after one of us not saying goodbye to her one night, decided that us college students don't know how to sit at a desk and answer basic library questions. So now she sits down there every other hour and criticizes our every move. When it's the middle of summer and only 7 people are in the library, shoot like this makes me want to quit my fudge job. We can't even read a fudge book at the desk at the library. It made me realize that she takes this shoot way too seriously, and that has made me care even less. Answer, I also worked part-time at a university library while a student and had similar issues. I mentioned it on here before, and turns out it is a very common library problem. Students are often faced with librarians putting more and more rules in place until you cannot do anything other than cleaning during downtime between patrons. As soon as the new no homework reading rule was in place, I put in my 2 weeks for another job. Edit. In case anyone is curious, I did not quit because I disliked the cleaning. I quit because the flexibility of doing homework, reading at work made this job worth taking over higher paying job offers. Story 60. Our bosses, after luring a lot of our employees with a generous holiday schedule, forced everyone to come in to work on the 4th of July and the 5th, which we also had scheduled off. That one was rough. Story 61. I worked at a club in Miami and the owner was out of his fudge mind, years of substances harmful behavior. When the housing market crashed, obviously people were spending far less going out, but he insisted we were all stealing. We had meetings once a week with all kinds of threats. Finally, he put in an automatic pouring system for 50,000. It basically looks like you're pouring drinks from a soda gun. Super boring. The fun vibe and flair we had was totally gone, which made sales drop even more. He ripped the system out 2 weeks later. Story 62. Walmart greeter here. Years ago, our terrible, clueless store manager was promoted to basically do paperwork all the time, which he was apparently good at. Cue a 6-ish month period where the various assistant co-managers tried to be the big shoes. If any one of you have worked Walmart before, you're already hearing warning bells. Well, near the end of this period, they laid down little X's made of red tape on the ground. Just 2. Greeters were told we had to stand with 1 foot on each X, and that's it. Let me repeat. They put down an X for each foot and told greeters not to move, which led to our malicious compliance from me, but a lot of resentment from all the greeters. Finally, we got a real store manager, and before he even came in to take charge, he did an incognito walkthrough of the store. On his way out, he asked what the X's were for. Within 20 minutes, those X's were gone. From what I hear, words like the most childish and demeaning thing I've ever heard were used. Story 63. Within 3 months, my last full-time employer removed funding for Beer Friday, made Beer Friday BYOB, removed Beer Friday until after hours, removed Beer Friday no cause, just removed it, made off-hours business parties mandatory, demanded output increase, this is a marketing firm, by 20, removed music out loud in parts of the office, removed option for headphones in the office, made all internships unpaid, lowered number of pictures you could have on your desk to 1, started accepting all clients. Regardless of who they were or what they did, including CareNet, morale got so bad that I didn't know how to handle the downward spiral, and I was let go for not being a good fit after working there for almost 4 years. They started hemorrhaging employees, and now everyone who isn't in a management position there is miserable. They've lost clients because of Glassdoor reviews. Answer, Lowered number of pictures you could have on your desk to one. I put 6 small photos of friends and family on my huge, blank, filthy partition. Boss, what is this? Your lounge room? Are you going to sit here and look at these photos all day instead of working? No, but occasionally I might glance over at the photo of my cousins and I balancing on the rusty pipeline over the viaduct and pretend I am not stuck in a 1970s shithole that reeks of piss while I do demeaning, pointless work for a total fuckwit, if that's okay. Story 64. We were all contract employees and were told that our jobs had ended, so we would all be expected to apply for lower paying versions of our jobs. Half of us decided not to apply, and the bosses were super mad. We all told them we wouldn't be applying and we didn't have to do that, but they were still mad at us. They tried to block other departments from hiring 2 of us. Story 65. Accidentally forwarded an email to the entire team of a conversation, meanie outnamed team members. That was harsh. Story 66. Several years ago, I was employed at a company that was notorious for its high-stress, heavy workload atmosphere. There were a number of different departments that all collaborated to some extent on upcoming projects and releases, along with a few ancillary teams that focused on either legal matters or community management. Despite everyone having discrete tasks and assignments, the organization's structure for bonuses was based entirely on overall profits, meaning that many people, particularly those folks working in a support capacity, had about as much control over their own success as they did over whether or not a tragic end bird would smack into one of the building's windows. That didn't stop the folks in upper management from pretending otherwise, though. If you all work hard, various high-level managers used to say, you'll be taking home 5% of your total salary as a bonus. If we meet certain milestones, you might even get 10%. What about those of us who always work hard? Someone would respond. Our jobs don't directly affect revenue. Shut up, the managers would reply. Also, shut up. I may be paraphrasing. Anyway, this state of affairs was eventually recognized as being a less than appealing carrot for the company's workhorses, and a solution was proposed. Every department's quarterly budget would be weighed against quarterly revenue, and the resulting percentage would be used to calculate individual bonuses. There was some kind of complicated equation which allegedly governed this, and the change was trumpeted as being good for everyone. Finally, we were told our individual efforts would actually contribute to our bonuses. It didn't take long for someone to notice a slight problem, though. The so-called change wasn't really a change at all. It was just a convoluted way of hiding the fact that everyone was still being held accountable for overall success, regardless of what they actually did. Furthermore, it was discovered that the milestones had been pushed up significantly, meaning that nobody would get a bonus unless some fairly unrealistic goals were met. The fanfare and fawning over the whole thing seemed disingenuous at best. Needless to say, someone pointed this out. Shut up, the managers replied. TLDR, bad business bilks bargained bonuses. The situation with unpaid bonuses and gradual layoffs shows how important it is for management to be transparent during a crisis. Instead of solving the issue, the company chose to keep people in a state of uncertainty, which ultimately led to the loss of top talent and a total collapse of morale. Story 67. We had a great season. He made a lot of money. He made enough money to pay all the bills and salaries for the year and about $150,000 extra. A few months later, he says, we aren't doing well and needs to cut everyone's pay. We are all subcontracted, so he thought he could get away with it. It lasted 1 week as we told him, if he did it again, we were gone. Story 68. At an airplane factory, managers started rationing gloves, hairnets, masks, and trash bags at the same time we had to go on a 12-by-6 work week. Like that was going to make up for the increase in labor. Answer. I used to work in healthcare and as a student in different production plants where you needed gloves because everything was hot or dirty or because everything had to be very clean. When I started a new job in any of these fields, I swear you could get a good estimate of productivity and job satisfaction as soon as you saw how the glove situation was handled. If you cut costs by going cheap on that kind of protective gear, you don't care for your employees, and they know that. Story 69. Removed COLA raises each year for all employees and implemented a raise when promoted or take on more responsibility model. However, promotions are very rare and raises are never approved. So everyone is losing money to inflation each year, and they tried to sell it as a big win for the employees. We aren't stupid people. Answer: I've yet to work for a company that gives COLA raises, which is why I only stay for 3 to 4 years, because getting promoted always has a cap on how much of a raise you get. Usually the responsibility outweighs the increase in salary. So why stay when I can go to the competitor and there is no cap because they have to have competitive salary to attract people? So stupid. There's no benefit to being loyal anymore. Story 70. Hired a dude straight out of college and gave him more money than 90 of the people keeping the plant running. The guy can barely tie his shoes and has been moved between 6 departments over the course of a year because he can't do anything worth a shoot, but he's bros with a higher up, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't help morale when you tell people there's no budget for a promised raise and then hire a dipshit. Story 71. Had a boss everyone loved, then she got transferred to another store, and the new guy that replaced her decided the schedule that we'd all gotten used to needed to be shaken up. He posted the next week's schedule that was completely different than it had been under the previous manager. Got a bunch of complaints from people saying they can't work X days or Y times, and it seemed he was receptive since he took that schedule down. Then suddenly, bam, he just reposted the same exact schedule and said, fudge everyone. Oh, we had some people calling in sick from time to time under the old manager. But this new manager has pretty much half his crew every single day calling out because of his shoot tactics. Here's the first thing to learn about being a good manager. You don't need to shake things up for people to be better workers. You don't need to put your mark on anything if it's working just fine the way it was. Answer: a grocery store I worked at for just about 4 weeks or so in 2000 did that. The manager, who primarily employed high school seniors like myself, would state, your employer is your #1 priority. You work for them, not the other way around. I don't care about whatever teenager high school things you have going on. If you can't work the shifts I want you to, I don't want you to work for me. Only job I straight up walked out on after he told me I couldn't get off for my own graduation. Story 72. Do I have to pick one thing? We got a new warehouse manager. For a while, it was every day that there'd be some new change that eliminate morale. People dread coming to work now because who knows what it will be today. Here's a list of grievances in no particular order. He thinks we're Amazon. He came from Amazon and wants to make us Amazon. Amazon is the worst place in the world to work. He doesn't seem to understand that we make things, not just ship things. Track all the things manually because fudge you. He wants to know how many units we're producing by the hour, whether it counts as direct or indirect labor. He wants managers to plan for the day, a task which, given the nature of our business, may as well be planning on the weather. That means that I had to report my numbers twice, once at the end of the day from my actual machine logs, once so my manager too could make her plan, with a ton of micromanaging in the middle about which orders have or have not fulfilled. We could have proper warehouse tracking and automation software, but fudge it. Synced Excel spreadsheets, in people handwriting, shoot on paper, more middle management. We had too much already, but now we have a ton of new useless people trying to justify their jobs by making us do busy work for them. Training videos that don't apply to us, emailing people to do the jobs we were already doing, and endless meetings. You can never find our actual middle management, the people you need to get tasks done, because they're always in meetings, or taking the day off because no one wants to work here anymore. Tracking labor and productivity. We started having to juggle staff around, for no particular reason, to make the numbers work on paper. They permanently took away 2 of my staff, the 2 I was training to be able to do my job. Somehow they're still expected to fill my extremely technical position when I'm not there, without me being able to teach them anything. Cool, right? The rest of the time they're floating around other departments, doing a task just long enough for someone to train them on it before floating somewhere else. Moved my department across the warehouse. My physical location can't move. It would cost a whole lot to move my machines. But now everyone I work with is on the other end of the warehouse for no particular reason. Lots of changes to attendance policies. One of them lasted exactly a day. You get 24 paid personal hours per year on top of regular PTO, and if you're late, you have to use them in 1-hour blocks. So if you're 6 minutes late, go get a coffee or something. When you run out of personal time, you're fired. Half the staff was still working for a temp agency and didn't get paid personal time at all, meaning they'd be fired if they were late once. Thankfully, everyone raised this issue to their managers, and we got it retracted the next day. A general attitude of blame the employees. For instance, one of those middle management positions we have is a safety and facility inspector. But he's not ever here, so instead we have a committee of know-nothing people with other actual jobs who go around and write up reports and complain at you to fix things that aren't really your responsibility to fix. I've started kicking things back to middle management maintenance person whenever they complain. Oh, we're waiting on the maintenance guy. Get with him. He's not here now? Not my problem then. All problem, no fix. Like the above, we'll get directives about things not in our power to fix. For instance, all cartwheels must lock. Great! Not a single cart in the building has locking wheels. Are you replacing them? Or are you just going to yell at me that my cart wheels don't lock? Do you expect me to go out to Home Depot and buy locking wheels and/or carts with locking wheels? Have you allocated a budget for this? Are you giving me the company card? No. We already had morning meetings, but they instituted a chant requirement them. The new rumor is that we're going to be required to say the Pledge of Allegiance now. The snowballing effect of old-timers quitting and being fired. All of the old leadership is disappearing, and people are being asked to jobs above their pay grade, and nobody in charge knows anything anymore, which leads to more people quitting. The rumor is my warehouse is closing in less than a year. There's a bunch of petty shoot I didn't even mention here. I think they're trying to drive as many people out as they can so they don't have to pay unemployment. Suffice to say, I've been applying for walks and going on interviews. One of the last ones I went on, they said they already had a half-dozen applicants from my warehouse and thought we were going under. Story 73. Put up a poster that said, complaining is like vomiting. You feel better, but everyone around you feels sick. The morale was already bad, but it was just a shoot way to take a hit at upset employees rather than do anything positive. Story 74. I worked at a family-owned market that was well-known and loved by locals. The owners were a lovely couple that took care of their employees and would bend over backwards for their customers. They were very active in the community and highly respected. They had a few core employees and would hire on temp staff during the summer and holidays. The temps were mostly high schoolers and college kids that were home on break. They would bring back the same people as long as they could, and the kids would try to stay as long as they could. The pay was well above market for those positions. We could shop and get a 75 discount. After 6 months, you got 2 weeks paid vacation, and the owners would close the store a couple days a year and host a party for all of the employees. It was the best job any high schooler in the area could get. I lived right next to the store, and my parents were friends with the owners, so I was given a job there. All my friends were jealous. After working there for a few years, the couple decided they wanted to retire to spend time with their daughter and her children in another state. Many tears were shed, and they had a huge retirement party where they introduced their son to everyone and told us he was taking over. They gushed about his prestigious business education and background. As soon as they were gone, the son decided he was going to remake the store in his image. He fired basically all the staff, most of whom that had been there for 10 to 15 years. He then staffed the whole place with homeschool kids and junkies. He cut the discounts and vacations. He hired some old high school friends to manage the place so he could take the profits to go party and get coked out. The shop went from having the same staff for years to having to retrain an entirely new staff every other month. No one wanted to stay. Managers were reporting perfectly good product as damaged and taking it home. Shelves sat empty. Locals stopped shopping there. The place became a corpse of what it had been. The original owners had enough of their friends complain to them about their son that they came back for a short time and tried to make it right, but it was too late. Their original staff had all moved on, and vendors had stopped doing business with the store. They decided to close the store, sell the property, and move away permanently. Last I heard, the son was in trouble with the IRS and his wife divorced him when she found him banging a stripper. Story 75. Mandatory overtime, 7 days a week, 12-hour days. stated that we were purposely not hitting his physically impossible goals just to suck up overtime, even though no one wanted it. This went on for months. He'd also fire people, dozens at a time. The checks were nice, but I had to get out of there. And for the only time in my life, I quit a job without another one lined up. When I worked there, they preferred you to have some sort of technical background. Last I heard, they burnt through so many people they were hiring anyone. Also, for some reason, he wanted to take our chairs from us. He thought sitting not working hard. We worked on an assembly line, while often I would have to walk around. There would be long stretches of times where sitting made sense. But okay, whatever. He extended this philosophy to the engineers who had desk jobs, though, LOL. Mandatory 12-hour shifts without days off is a guaranteed path to burnout and mass resignations. The irony is that instead of solving the staffing shortage, management created an environment where keeping anyone on the team became almost impossible.